part of those discussions, we can learn and listen to what other parties are saying, and we're all human beings, and therefore we all need to learn from each other.
Because it's inclusive to include men, but also they are still the decision makers. So you cannot, if you do not get support from people in power, you will not achieve change.
Five, I would put them almost like, if you think about it as a progression of a ladder, and the opponents are at one extreme, and those are the ones who will be very difficult to convince. They are labeled opponents because they do not believe in equality and equity. Frankly, I don't necessarily recommend investing a lot of energy there. I think that they should not be ignored. But I think, so continue to make sure they're exposed to the messages, but I think the energy is going to be better spent in places where it's more likely to bring results, and that would be in the other categories. So one step up from the opponents would be skeptics, and these are people who are comfortable with status quo, but they are open to other views.
So thank you for tuning in to the Rise to Leadership podcast, a weekly show that explores topics that matter while sharing stories of inspiring leaders who are creating positive changes. Today, we are looking at how to invite men to the equality table so that together we can close the gender leadership gap. I'm Ebere Akadiri, the founder of Rise and Lead Women, and I am so honored to be having this conversation today with Rick Zednick and Zuzana Fuchikova and Stefan Tonon. I will briefly introduce them to you, but let me bring them up first. Hey! Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining me. I know Tessa is somewhere at the background. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Let me briefly talk about why we are having this conversation today. We've all heard that we need men to achieve gender diversity and inclusion. An effort for gender equality in the workplace and leadership cannot be tackled by women alone. Men have a role to play. But have you wondered why you don't see many men at events focused on advancing women? The first time we launched the Rise and Lead Summit in 2018, we had invited one man to join us to be one of our keynote speakers. And somebody said, why do you have to bring a man? And today we've seen that, evidence that bringing more men to the table is very important because men are already occupying the top leadership post, and we need their cooperation to close the gender gap. So today, this conversation is going to be interactive, and we want to be able to deal with the perceptions around motherhood and ways we can all work together, both men and women, to advance women and close the gender leadership gap. So I'm going to start my question with, let me bring Rick up. Everybody is here. Rick, say hello so everybody can know you're here. Thank you. Yeah, Rick. So Rick, first of all, as a woman, I would love to gain some insight into men's thoughts about conversations on gender equality. Is it a comfortable topic for most men to engage in, and why? I really love to know what made you realize that it's important for you to lend your voice to this issue of equality as well.
Well, Ibarra, thanks for organizing this, but all that you're doing for years now on the topic. And I think you were wise and you were prescient in involving men from the first summit that you organized, because I do think it's essential. As for the question about involving men in the topic, I find that this is a very simple question that many people ask, but it's actually, there's a very complex answer to it, because you can't say one size fits all for men, right? There are 3 billion men across the planet, and they range from being very, very comfortable with this as a topic to being very uncomfortable. And this is something, I don't know if it's the right moment now, but I will be happy to talk about sort of, I divide men into 5 categories.
Yeah.
And then that's the way I think we can think about the approach to different types of men.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, of course. I heard you during our 2019 summit, and we're going to talk more about that. But for now, let me welcome Stefan Turner. Hi, Stefan.
Hi, Ebere. How you doing?
Yeah, thank you for joining me and also for joining us. You are the Vice President, Human Resources at Insight in EMEA. And so my question to you would be, what role does HR play in creating a more conducive environment for male and female employees to engage more with one another and have these difficult conversations?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank you for this invitation, Ebere. I think that this is an important topic, and I'm just honored to be one of your guests and talk about this topic. I think human resources plays a very critical role in driving these discussions and showing that we need to make sure that we have the conversations about gender and equality and about the opportunities that human beings have building their career. And I think that we play a key role. At Insight, we're trying to also make sure that all of our teammates, as we call them, have that discussion as well. So I don't always believe that this needs to be driven top down. I'd like to believe and promote that this is driven from the teammates themselves as well, to have that open discussion. And at Insight, we have the Insight Alley program, where people that are part of that are allowed to speak up on the indifferences that we see, the equality that we kind of miss in discussions. And therefore, I fully support this video call with you, Ebere, to talk about this important topic.
Thank you, Stefan. And now I come to Susanna. Susanna, how can men be engaged in the discussion around gender diversity more efficiently? Is it a question of training, communication? How do we create this awareness for men to understand that we need them to get involved in this conversation?
Thank you, Ebere, for the question and for inviting me. Really appreciate the opportunity. Quick disclaimer, I am not by far a diversity expert as you and great male allies that we have on the panel, but I'm a woman that has faced a lot of obstacles on my way through the career, and very often it was male allies that have allowed me to surmount these obstacles. So I'm really glad for the opportunity to share my learnings. So on the more efficient involvement of men, for me personally, it's important to realize the definition or key aspects of a male ally, and that is about listening, understanding, and active support. So if we want to achieve these 3 types of support from men, I think it's important that we address all the 3 things that you were mentioning in your question. So how we call them at Uber, where we have a male allyship program within our employee resource groups, women at Uber and Black at Uber. So it's effectively a broader way of allyship, is communication, accompaniment, and accountability. So it's just slightly different words for what you said. And part of communication is really about creating consciousness, which involves, listening, engaging both between men and women, but also specialized NGOs. And it's also about taking concrete action, like series of 14 pledges that we have developed internally, very concrete things that men can pledge to follow, and then provide them with some visual reminders, which in the current time have digital form of, for example, Zoom background, which reminds them every day in their work what they have pledged to achieve. Then on accompaniment, that's basically a follow-up 1 month on, so that we can dig deeper into what are the problems, what are the solutions. And finally, accountability is basically about making D&I an inherent part of performance reviews within the company. So to give an example, at Uber, senior executives have their bonuses and remuneration tied to the achieving of D&I goals, which makes them feel personally accountable and involved.
Thank you. Absolutely, that is very important. It's important to hold leaders and almost everybody accountable, just like Stephan said. And you've just raised this issue of allyship. And when we had the roundtable organized by Rise and Lead Women during the International Women's Day, Susanna, you also mentioned the importance of male allyship in female leadership inclusion. But for somebody who is listening, can you just tell us, what do you mean by allyship? What is allyship?
Well, thank you also, Ebere, for very carefully listening. And I think that's really the key aspect of being an ally, linked to the second part, which is understanding, or at least making an effort to understand. And that finally brings us to the final, I think the most important part, which is about active support. That could take place via, small or bigger actions or gestures. And here, personally, I don't mind whether the male ally or other type of ally essentially just wants to support the woman in question and her cause, or whether they see a bigger picture and they realize that by pledging support, they effectively benefit themselves and organization at large.
Okay, absolutely. That is very exciting. And I know, talking about allyship, Stephan, I saw that during the International Women's Day, Insight launched this allyship program. And can you talk us through it? And what do you hope to achieve through that program? What is working for you?
Yeah, the allyship at Insight, there's lots of different programs that you can do, and I agree with Susanna. The listening part is so important, and we listen to our teammates very, very closely to come up with these initiatives to make sure that we make this a better place. And as an Insight ally, what we say: you stand up for one another, you speak out against injustice or discrimination, and help to contribute to an inclusive community where everybody feels that they belong. And that's linked to our value system that we have at Insight, our hunger, heart, and harmony. And that is for us very, very important. And like Susanna said, listening to each other and having an opinion and speak out if you want to, that is the key of being an ally at Insight. But also the allyships that I see in other companies and other organizations work very, very strongly.
And let me bring back everyone. Yeah, so Rick, over to you. In our 2019 summit, you talked about, you placed men in 5 different spectrums, according to their receptiveness of feminism. You talked about the opponents, skeptics, uncommitted supporters, and the champions. I still remember those words. Can you please talk about this a bit more? And I'm curious, what can we do to convert the opponents to champions of gender equality?
So thank you, Ebere. Thanks for remembering that. And yeah, I mean, it is indeed a spectrum. There are the 5. I would put them almost like, if you think about it as a progression of a ladder, and the opponents are at one extreme, and those are the ones who will be very difficult to convince. They are labeled opponents because they do not believe in equality and equity. Frankly, I don't necessarily recommend investing a lot of energy there. I think that they should not be ignored. But I think, so continue to make sure they're exposed to the messages. But I think the energy is going to be better spent in places where it's more likely to bring results. And that would be in the other categories. So one step up from the opponents would be skeptics. And these are people who are comfortable with status quo, but they are open to other views. And, they may just sort of say, oh, aren't we beyond political correctness? So those are the kinds of people that I think the steps are to say, do something discreet with them. Let them open their thoughts in a private conversation, and then invite them to read things or things where they're not necessarily going to feel threatened and be defensive. If you're successful with them, they may move to what the third category, which is are uncommitted. And these are people who are sort of saying, okay, I'm not quite sure, but they're at a tipping point. And if they maybe say something like, okay, I agree women should no longer face greater obstacles than men. That's a signal, right? That they can move from being passive to perhaps moving to be active. And then, so that fourth category would be the supporters. And supporters are the ones who are already, probably their life already represents a shift away from traditional gender roles in some way. They're maybe doing things, maybe they're already commenting on social media, maybe attending events. And those would be the ones that are most ripe to actually become champions. The fifth category, the highest sort of rung on the ladder, I would say. And the champions are ones who are not just convinced, but they're trying to convince others. You know, they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk. And they are actually actively promoting women in the workplace or in their lives outside of work. So those would be the 5 categories. But my main message would be identify, if you've got somebody in mind, identify which category they're in, and then use the tools to get them from that one to the next one up. And don't try to jump 4 categories at once.
So Rick, which category do you belong to?
Well, and the other thing is that these things can be a little bit fluid and depend on context. And I would say in some context, most contexts, perhaps I'm probably a very enthusiastic supporter. In some contexts, I would say I fit into the category of champion.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you. And Stefan, which category do you find yourself?
I think I'm a supporter. I think that we can always do better. I think that if I listen very carefully to what Rick is saying and what Susanna is saying, there's always things that you can learn from others, and that's why we have these valuable conversations. And I think that if I continue to learn and step into the roles of others and trying to understand them, and with all due respect, we need to listen with our hearts to understand what somebody is saying. And that is so, so important, because most of the times we are listening and just responding what we hear, but we don't really understand what the message was. And therefore, I always feel that I'm a supporter. I hope I will be a champion one day, Rick, but it would be nice. But if I'm a supporter every single day, then that's cool with me.
I hope you're going to get there soon, because I've seen your zeal and how you're supporting even what we do at Rise and Lead Women. And when I asked Rick which category, I saw Susanna saying 5, champion. Susanna, why did you say that?
I want to say, actually, for me, both of you are champions, because based on our previous interactions and the fact that you in a way went into the tiger's den and appear in the discussion today, I think that that really talks tons about your very proactive engagement and support for the cause. But perhaps I am biased to our previous interactions.
Absolutely. Thanks for the amazing insight, Rick, Stefan, and Susanna. I'm coming back to Susanna now as a woman like me, among men. One of the hurdles which women have to overcome in corporate world is the bias of men against mothers, especially pregnant women. Sometimes they view motherhood and pregnancy to be limitations to women's abilities to carry out their work effectively. Have you experienced such or witnessed someone who has experienced such at work?
Are you asking all of us about it?
I'm asking Susanna as a woman if she has experienced this, or
But I would like to hear later also from the man.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
From my side, so I'm a mother of 2 kids, still quite young, 2 and 5-year-old, and they are both at home being guarded by my husband. So I very much hope they will not jump in and interrupt us. And I have experienced in my professional life both the negative and positive reactions or support. The negative one was when I believe I was negatively discriminated during a hiring process that was going amazingly well. I was made to believe that there was a second candidate that was put on hold so that I could advance. But the very enthusiastic, nearly immediate answers from this company stopped abruptly after I told their HR department, when they were asking if I have any vacation planned. I told them that I was planning to go on a honeymoon. And I think, interviewing a woman in her late 20s, they probably made an assumption that I would immediately go off to have babies, which I didn't for other 7 years. But suddenly, from then on, I haven't heard from them ever again. Just very dry message 1 month later that they opted for another candidate, which happened to be a male. So fine, I didn't take it personally, but it made me think. And then entirely on the other side of the spectrum, my current employer, Uber, came to me when I was 9 months pregnant, and just actually 1 week before giving birth. And out of fun, I just responded to them and say, well, I'm happy to chat, but I'm about to give birth and I will be off for the next 6 months. And I didn't expect them to come back to me, as many other companies did. And it was a little bit of my experiment, if you will, social experiment with companies. And they did come back and were very keen to speak. And then they hired me and waited 6 months, despite the fact that they had nobody in the role for over a year. And I can tell you that this was very, very smart of them, because they bought my loyalty for a very long time. And perhaps two more things to add here. One is that the discrimination does not necessarily come only from women, but also from female managers, who sometimes may be pushed within their organizations to meet short-term goals rather than to take a long-term approach. And the second relevant observation, I believe, is that what would help pregnant women or women on leave is if companies effectively implemented policies that level the playing field between men and women. And for me, the best practice, again, is Uber, where we have an 18-week global parental leave. So it's not whether you hire men or women, they can disappear for 18 weeks. And I think that's very empowering, both for women, but also for men, and makes us better parents and employees.
Wow, there's something, when you were saying this, I was going to ask you how both scenarios made you feel. But when you said that they have your loyalty because of that simpler act, and I believe that so many companies or leaders need to learn a lot from what you just said. You want employees' loyalty, you have to be ready to get it. You don't get it like that. It's simple acts of kindness, which Uber demonstrated. Thanks for sharing that. And so let me go to Stefan now. Stefan, in my last week's interview with Wendy Murray, we discussed a situation where some women lack the courage to tell their bosses that they are pregnant. As a HR professional, is this still happening in 2021? Do you have some examples to share?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to say it's still happening, Ebra, and it's very hard to say that even when I work in HR. As you know, my teams are predominantly females, and I feel privileged to work with all those females. And the best thing that can happen to somebody and a family is to bring a new human in this fantastic world. That's a celebration in itself. However, when they need to tell their employer that they're pregnant, particularly when they are, but not exclusively, but particularly when it's a white male sitting at the other side of the table, or nowadays on the other side of the camera, their first thought process is not about celebrating life that they're going to put on this planet. No, they're looking at the productivity that they will lose in the next couple of months. And that is unfortunately how still a lot of people think. And I told you the story, Ebra, that I had a conversation in my team where we have people that get pregnant and expecting a new human life on this planet, and I celebrate that big time. So, and I still know that females come to the conversation with still anxiety in wondering how that other person is going to respond. Even with me, and people know me, I'm going to celebrate that big time. We'll pull out the champagne and we're going to celebrate because this is one of the greatest events ever. But there's still people in the back of their minds are worried about telling this to their employer, which is a very, very sad thing to still experience in 2021. And I hope that every male and female leader that listens to this understands the need to celebrate new life and figure out the details at a later stage. This is a very important step for somebody to come to the other side of the table and explain to you their most happiest thing that happens in their life, and they have to have an anxiety in their mind to tell that to their employer. That is just absolutely wrong. And I cannot tell that enough and enough and enough and repeat that every single time.
That is absolutely wrong. And Stefan, thank you for your openness and honesty in sharing this. And I have to go to Rick now. Rick, what are your thoughts about these biases and how can we tackle them?
So I agree with what I've heard from Zuzana and Stefan, and I would just add that I think part of the solution is moving from practices performed by individuals to policies that are enforced by structures, right? And so I think that if you have a structure where actually decision making is made by a diverse group of people, I think that already helps a lot, right? And so if you have as Stefan was describing, a management team, which it doesn't even have to be all male, but if it's distinct majority male, I think there becomes a groupthink, which it's harder for the diverse perspectives, certainly the female perspective on issues of hiring and promoting and things like that, to get the same share of voice as a male perspective. And when it comes to the kinds of things we've just heard about, then it has very serious consequences for not just individuals' careers, but for organizations and the way they're able to perform. So I think the more we can make sure that structures are well balanced with varied perspectives and that policies are in place. And I love the story Zuzana told about Uber. I mean, to hear policies that are actually there to respect individuals' choices and value people's talents and understand that when you do that, it has long-term benefits.
Oh, thank you for sharing, and you're very right. And this is a very important topic, I can say, and I want us to to dig deeper regarding cultures and the systemic structures that have been set that is making it impossible for women to feel free to tell their bosses that they are pregnant. How can we? Where do we start from? How can we normalize, being able to be happy that we're pregnant and, share with our bosses and colleagues that we're pregnant? How can we normalize this? Anyone can jump in.
I would just say one thing, which is that I do also believe we need to move to a place where men are taking their share of the parental leave also. And I think that's when things will start to break down and there won't be the automatic view of parenting is the mother's responsibility. I think that's essential, and it's starting to happen very slowly in some places.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, Stefan?
I agree, Rick. I think that if that borderline is changing and it's a parenthood rather than a motherhood, then that goes a long way. And I'm lucky enough to live in Sweden where they're on the forefront of doing that in the Swedish labor market. But that needs to be common practice for all companies. They need to understand that this is something between a man and a woman, and it's a family that is founded, and both of the parents are responsible for raising their child, and they need to have the flexibility to be treated the same way and not just see it as the mother needs to bring up the child, and therefore there's no way that somebody that is female can have a career in a company.
Thank you, Stefan.
And if I could add, perhaps also recognize the transferable skills that women, also men as fathers, gain. I think I've never been such an efficient multitasker since I've become a mother. And voila, my 5-year-old is just entering.
It's okay. We need to normalize that, And of course, for our audience watching on either Facebook, on LinkedIn, if you have any contribution or question, feel free to type it as we go to the next question. And so my next question is really, this is even for me, for Rise and Lead Women in particular. If you've noticed, so many men do not attend women-focused events. And I also understand that all the female inclusion initiatives in so many companies, that so many men don't feel they should get involved. I remember in 2018, like I mentioned, I actually invited a man to join the panel of 3 people. And I was called out on LinkedIn by a fellow woman. She said, why should we involve a man? Why should we even invite a man to this conversation? And I remember saying to her, the inclusion of women does not mean the exclusion of men. I don't even know where that came out from my head. So I answered her directly. And so I've been wondering, and then I remember in 2019, Rick, when you came to the summit, and we had this male panel with 2 women. And I tell you, all our attendees were so excited, and they started asking after the summit, how can we have more men join us? How can we have more men join us? So my question now is, I have to start with Susanna first, to tackle the first issue I had where I was called out for even involving a man. What do you think about that first, coming from women who believe that women organizations should be exclusively for women? What do you think, Susanna?
I disagree. I agree with what you said earlier, because it's inclusive to include men, but also they are still the decision makers. So you cannot, if you do not get support from people in power, you will not achieve change. So I believe it's as simple as that, being inclusive. And also, the support from men is very important, also from the discussion perspective, because we know that when men speak about gender diversity, it tends to have more impact. So it's absolutely crucial that male allies team up with women to help us move the needle and improve things together.
Thank you for sharing that. And then let me bring everyone back again. And my next question to Rick is, so for organizers of women's initiatives or events wishing to engage male allies, what strategies should we apply to bring more men to the table?
Well, I think making sure that they know that they are welcome and that this is a topic that affects them and that it affects their interests, I think is it goes back often to, what's in it for me. I think it's true for all of us who are human, is for them to understand, okay, I may choose to do this because I have, a wife and 2 daughters, but I also think that it's going to be benefiting not just them, but it's going to benefit me as well. And I think for people who may not have daughters, for example, they may have a less obvious motivation other than making it clear to them, okay, this will help you in your work or help you in your life. If you get exposed to these issues. I think we have to be careful about ghettoizing sort of the gender topic as being one that's just relevant to women. There's lots of good reasons that men benefit from these conversations and from the progress we make.
Thank you for sharing. And Stefan, what do you think?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Rick. I mean, if we are part of those discussions, we can learn and listen to what other parties are saying, and we're all human beings, and therefore we all need to learn from each other. It is a matter of fact, and I cannot change that I'm a very privileged person. I'm white and I'm male in this world, so I need to accept that is the case, and it all starts with acceptance. And I like to learn from female groups and from male groups, but all kinds of diversity groups, to make sure that I can apply what I've learned much better, either in my business, but also in my personal life. And I think that is very, very important. And if I'm not involved in organizations like Rise and Lead, and I'm not involved in, big organizations where it's 80% female and only 20% male, from every engagement that I have with a human being, I will learn something. And if I can take that learnings and apply it in my personal life and in my business life, then everybody wins. And that means that, the females around the table need to understand that, you need the influences of males as well, wherever they come from, to get your point across and let us understand what kind of disadvantages you might see in your careers or in your personal lives. Because if I don't hear them, I cannot respond or I cannot change them.
Thank you for sharing that as well. And so for me, for the next summit, Rise and Lead Summit, which is coming up in September, we want to have at least 30% men come to our summit. What specifically, do we need to write the page in a particular way that will make a man feel that, yeah, I should be here? Apart from trying to convince them that it benefits them. People have heard all these statistics. They know that when you have more women, you have better results. And yet we're still struggling with closing the gap. What specifically do I need to do to bring men to the table? And anybody can jump in, yeah.
I just have a suggestion. So we know that for decades, if not centuries, women have often been outnumbered in professional contexts, right? If they go into a meeting and they're 20% women or whatever the number is. So I think it's good for, and that has typically probably enriched women and made them stronger because it's uncomfortable, right? We all grow through going through some sort of stretching exercise, which makes us uncomfortable. And I think that would be part of the argument I would make to men, is to say, you're not going to get stronger. You're not going to grow unless you stretch and get out of your comfort zone. And this is one way that you can do it.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I would also ask your female guest that you're going to get to Rise and Lead, Ebra, to spread the word to their male colleagues and confront them necessarily in a positive way, to say, you have an opinion, I would like to learn from you as well. Why don't you come to our conference and discuss that with the female leaders out there? Make sure that you have those conversations, because if the conversation doesn't take place, there's nothing that will come to a common ground and fix it together as human beings rather than just as females or as males.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Rick and Stefan. And Susanna, do you have anything to add to that?
I was just doing exactly what you're doing with this event, engage with men up front to jointly discuss, listen, learn from one another, build trust. And that, I think, that will secure you more participation from men at the summit. Then something that works at Uber, it's a little bit of a big gimmick, but we have an intranet website. And so we give a little badge to the man who is a male ally or who made the pledges that I was mentioning earlier. And it's even little things like that can matter and raise awareness.
Thank you. I know somebody, I don't have a question, but I think it's somebody was just sharing that, this is such a great insight. Understand what category your employees fall into when it comes to gender equity, and make sure you invest your time and energy in the right place. Thanks, Dovio, for sharing. So my final question today is, of course, we know that women, when we talk about gender leadership, we lose a lot of talent at the mid-level. So I want to hear from all of you. What do you see that causes that? Why do we lose women at the mid-level on their leadership journey? And what can we do, both as individuals for women and also as an organization, to fix this? Anyone can jump in. Rick, do you want to start?
I mean, it actually reminds me of Susanna's story earlier, right? And I've experienced similar things, but from the other side of the table, the hiring and the negotiating table. And I've had, to my embarrassment and shame, I've been in situations where the organization has not taken the right approach. Fortunately, I've been in situations where we have taken the right approach as well. And I just think that, it's making sure that these biases that individuals have, and then once individuals have, then they become organizational biases if they're not actively worked against to counteract biases, that those biases become culture. And we've got to let people know that you should be looking for the best talent, and that you cannot make assumptions about people's circumstances, and you should be able to work with the best talent to make sure that it's a situation that they can thrive in.
Well, work with it, get the best talent, and don't make assumptions. I love that. And Stefan, what do you have to say?
Yeah, for us, if I look at my company that I work for today, our values and our culture are very, very strong. And what helps us as well is that we have our allyships where people speak up if they feel that situations should not happen in a way that they happen. So I think that you need to give the ability to teammates to make sure that that their voice is heard, that you're really listening to things that are happening so you can correct them. And I think that that is very, very important. I think it all starts on how the company is built up and how the values work and what allyship actually means to them. That is not nice posters or nice posters on LinkedIn, but actually the values are lived within the company to give everybody an equal opportunity. And I'm fortunate enough to work at Insight that we have that, and that we have female leaders, where in my leadership team, there's more female leaders than male leaders, which is the exception. And I'm fully aware of that. But if we can promote that much more and understand and show others that you can grow and that you can get there, if you ask for the right support and if you address the challenges that you see, then we can all work together to make this world a better place and make the workplace a better place as well.
Thank you so much, Stefan, for those inspirational words. Thank you. And Susanna?
That's $1 million question, Ebere, and I don't think there is a simple answer or solution. We all know that we have to break the glass ceiling, but yeah, if it was only a feeling. There isn't one simple way. I think what we are doing with tying clear D&I targets to the performance of people in leadership position, be it men or women, I think is important. But likewise, I think it's important to continue to make it clear that gender equality is not about positive discrimination of women, and it doesn't undermine meritocracy, because I believe this is a big fear of many men when they say, well, if 7 men deserve to be on the board and only 3 women, it should be that way. But is it really because they are better, or is it because women do not have the same access to the powerful networks that men have? Which is why, again, we need male allies, which in my personal experience, it was a lot of male allies that helped me advance in my career, precisely because they connected me to the right people and opportunities, which otherwise I wouldn't have had access to.
Thanks for sharing. What I'm hearing, all of us are like saying the same thing, that we need to deal with perceptions, and we also need to understand that power is vested among men, white male at this time, and the power needs to be shared. I mean, what we are asking for is equal opportunities for women to also prove themselves and show that they are capable of doing some things, instead of people thinking, oh, you have a child, are you sure your attention is not going to be divided? Just let me be the one that will judge myself. Important thing is, what is the work I'm supposed to do, and let me do it. And so thank you for sharing all your insights. It's been so wonderful. I mean, we've covered a lot in such a short time. And before we go, I know that this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I was telling Stefan the other day that sometimes I feel so unmotivated. I'm wondering, as leaders, how are you guys taking care of your self-care to make sure you continue to push through this pandemic? Let's start with Rick.
Actually, I've become much more aware of this in recent months than ever before in my life, and so it's making sure that you get out of your house and you exercise. Certainly in my case, that's been part of it, but also being open about challenges. I mean, I was not even open with myself, to be honest with you, when I was feeling challenged on some issues that were affecting my mental health. And then once I acknowledged those and then I could speak about them, then it got a lot easier.
That's good. Susanna, what about you?
Similar, take care of yourself, including through sports. And my yoga class is starting in 45 minutes. So thank you for finishing on time, but also take care of others. So it's important to be even more human and close to your colleagues, or anyone you talk to in this period, and just ask and genuinely be interested about how they are, and can you help? Because sometimes, you know, even a short positive message can make someone's day.
Thank you. And Stefan?
Yeah, it's so true what Susanna says. I think that you cannot help others if you don't help yourself. That's where it all starts. We make very, very long days nowadays because, you know, the home situation and an office situation is now blended into one. So we all make long hours. And I catch myself sometimes as well that I don't have the attention span that I should have for a teammate or an employee. And hopefully and luckily, teammates will say that to me, and then you get to the realization, oh, take care of yourself as well. So I as far as I can here in Sweden, because in the winters it's a little bit harder, but I try to get my hour walk in the morning to make sure that you can prepare for the day. But you need to make sure that you're in a good mental health yourself if you're willing and accepting to listen to others and help others, because otherwise it won't work. So make sure that whatever it is, exercising or walking or just listen to a podcast, make sure that you take time for yourself as well, away from this lovely computer.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I always ask these questions to leaders, and one day I asked myself, how do you take care of your self-care? And I had no answer. And then I started at the beginning of the year, I made sure that, you know, I became intentional about the things I say yes to. You know, starting from there, I said I want to focus on things that matter to me, and also, you know, switching off those Clubhouse notifications because they were driving me crazy. You know, every time my friends go in there, I see it. I had to switch them off and learn how to watch Netflix, especially those long 8-hour series. And someday my son asked me, Mommy, are you okay? You've been watching television for the last 8 hours. I said, I'm okay. You know, I'm okay. So thank you so much for sharing.
Can I add one more thing? In case you were close to Brussels and in case you are really watching Netflix until the early morning hours, this Saturday at 5 o'clock in the morning, there is a Darkness into Light charity walk in Brussels, precisely to show support for this important case. And I will be there at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm sure I will be angry with me at 4 o'clock.
Please put it on.
There you go. Another thing how we can show we care about ourselves and others.
Oh, that's so good. Put it on LinkedIn and tag us as well, so we can, you know, share that and promote.
Oh, I like that concrete action. That's always important.
Yes. And if there's anything you're doing and you want our audience to follow or get involved, you know, feel free to share or even tag me, and I kind of promote it. And I'm always happy to support. Always happy. So is there a parting word? Is there something else you want to say before we...
Ebera, I had promised to share my Netflix tips, and I'm just going to give 2 recommendations. So they're both showing strong female leaders. One, of course, very well known, The Crown. I just were sucked into it, and there are lots of issues of sort of gender dynamics in there, and women leaders, and you know, she's an amazing story. The other, which is less well known, is Borgen, the Danish drama about a female prime minister of Denmark.
Okay.
It's similar, and but it's pure fiction, so you don't get confused about fact and fiction in Borgen. But it's amazing drama. I recommend it.
What is the name of the second one? The first one is The Crown. What's the second one?
It's called Borgen, Borgen, and it's about as I say, it's a fictional female prime minister of Denmark.
This weekend I'm hitting Netflix. I'm gonna watch them, both of them. Stefan, do you have parting words or any other thing to add?
No, I just want to thank you for your time. I think that this is an important topic, and I'm glad that we have such an interactive group of people that has an opinion to talk about this. Thank you for inviting me, and you know, keep up the fantastic work that you do with your organization, Ebera.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope to see all of you for the Rise and Lead Summit. We will definitely reach out invitation. Let me just say bye to those watching us now so I can end the stream and then we come back inside. So bye-bye to everybody. Thank you for watching us. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.